Welcome to College Talk, a podcast brought to you by American Campus Communities, where students love living. Join us for topics including how to prepare your student and mom and dad for college so they can thrive. Now your host, Anthony Rad.
Hello, listeners, and thank you for joining us for the third podcast episode of College Talk. I'm your host, Anthony Rad. In today's episode, we're going to explore the topic of community building on campus and engaging students in a meaningful way, including an expert with an esteemed career in educational leadership. Today's topic includes engagement and support for students adjusting to campus life. We are very excited to speak with our special guest today. Dr. Chris Heasley is an assistant professor of educational leadership in the School of Health Studies and Education at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. Dr. Heasley has served as a university administrator at both public and private institutions of higher education. In his current position, his research focuses on the interconnectedness between educational environments and student outcomes in areas related to psychosocial development and socially constructed identities. He teaches courses on advanced quantitative research and education, educational leaders as researcher and reflective practitioner, and educational environments and community relations. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today, and let's go ahead and dive right in. So, Dr. Heasley, students have been adjusting to this new normal, these past 2 years. And now that they're making their way back to a traditional university campus where most students have never had the opportunity to establish this connection with campus, this kind of leads me to my first question for you. How does engaging students lend itself to a sense of community on campus?
Sure. So engagement is really a vehicle that we use to actually actualize sense of community. So I consider a sense of community as a combination of 4 elements. So I'm looking at membership, influence, fulfillment of needs, and shared emotional connection. Membership is really what somebody gets from being a part of an organization, right? So there's this unique attribute that one gets from being involved in that group. Influence is this reciprocal relationship where one is both contributing to the community, but the community is also contributing back. Fulfillment of needs is that people have needs that have to be met, and that community uniquely offers that. And last one is that because there is this strong sense of membership, there's this emotional connection or tie that each one has to each other that makes that community unique. And so I'm looking at and discussing how sense of community can be used to then influence the way that we interact with one another and how students engage in that community, in that environment.
Perfect. So let me ask you this. How and when is it appropriate to engage with your student as a parent? Can you maybe kind of explain a little bit of that for our listeners?
Sure. So the quick answer is whenever a parent or caregiver feels it's necessary, it's definitely when they want to take the opportunity to reach out to their student. There's a fine line between supporting, hovering, and helicoptering. But as a human race, there's a deep desire to experience community. So I would encourage parents and caregivers to reach out whenever they feel it's necessary, and using those as an opportunity to check in with their students. It can be very helpful for their acclimation process, and it's important for us to show them that we're there, we're present, and that we want them to do well. But of equal importance is also determining the type of engagement that's best.
Dr. Heasley, can you mind maybe elaborating a little bit more? You said there's a fine line between hoovering and helicopter parents. What is that line? What can our parents learn from that?
I think it's important for us to think about how are we engaging our student and helping them develop so that they can begin to navigate institutional process differently than us doing it for them. And so if we can give them the skill set to be successful on their own, that developmental process is going to continue to help them as they continue to be young adults, even beyond college. So I'm looking for and encouraging parents and caregivers to engage with the student, but really start to transform being from, let's get the analogy of rather than being a coach, being more of a team captain or even just a teammate.
And speaking of engagement, can you share with our listeners some of the types of engagement you can elaborate on a little bit more?
Sure. There's several models in which we can choose from in terms of what are the different complexities and elements that would comprise different types of engagement. But I'm just going to leave your listeners with 3 different types. The first one, and the reason I'm choosing these, I should say, is because I really feel like these offer a holistic approach, and they incorporate both the mind, body, and spirit to them. So the first one, the mind, would be this cognitive engagement. And this involves the extent to which students focus on their role as a student. So this would include their academic work and any kind of commitments they have to student groups, athletics, different clubs, any kind of university-affiliated commitment. The next one is a body or physical engagement. And this involves the focus on physical relationships, both friendly and intimate. It can also be used to describe how one engages with their environment. Keep in mind that the environment may be one that's based on an organization, or it can even be socially constructed.
Now, what exactly do you mean by socially constructed? Do you mind explaining that a little bit more?
So, understanding how one engages with the environment based on the person's perceptions and their experiences. So here we might see how social identities, such as race, gender identity, sexual orientation, relationship status, political ideology, ableism, any of those, or any combination thereof, and how those influence the engagement that one has or takes part in. And the third one is spirit or emotional engagement. And this is when we're asking students about how they feel as they engage with their peers, faculty, campus staff, or the physical environment itself.
Thank you for sharing, Dr. Heasley. How can you support development for your student while they're attending college? School's around the corner. What's the best way to support the development for the student while they're adjusting back to campus life?
Sure. So there are several ways parents and caregivers can help or can be helpful or work to partner with the university towards an individual community support, and development while their students attend college. There are several ways that parents and caregivers can be helpful or work in partnership with the university towards individual and community support and development while their students attend college. The goal here is to empower parents and caregivers so they can empower their students. This is the time to change, again, from that coach perspective to a team captain or teammate role. And so the first I would say is actively listen. Make sure that you're actively listening to your students. It's the single most important role that you can play. Take an interest in hearing what they are willing to share rather than being quick to ask questions before fully hearing their comments and their thoughts and concerns. Next is to ask questions. This is where you're going to focus on understanding from their perspective before you then offer an opinion. It's really important here that these are more clarifying questions. They're probing questions. It's not questions that evoke a sense of opinion from your perspective. Next, we want to offer validation to their feelings. This involves acknowledging that it's okay to be any myriad of emotions, happy, mad, sad, homesick, to have feelings of isolation or strong affinity and communal association. Whatever the feeling, we're looking for parents and caregivers to really help normalize those experiences. Next, educate yourself. Become aware of campus policies, procedures, and resources. Being able to steer your students towards these supporting frameworks helps us demonstrate that you, as a parent and caregiver, provide a supportive framework towards their development of competency and life skills. Next, help determine an action plan for how best to move forward. What help looks like can vary. The student may need you to help them be centered in that moment. It may be a call to be reflected. It may be contemplative in the experience. It's important to ask yourself when a student is complaining, what's the reason for their involvement of you in that situation? Are they merely seeking a trusting mentor for venting and perspective? Or is there a need for counsel and advice on how they can navigate institutional process or resources? For example, is the situation one in which safety, equity, inclusion, and care are being compromised, avoided, or neglected?
Yeah, and you definitely made some great key takeaways, Dr. Heasley, talking about parents to empower their students, and I think that's such great words with that. And basically for the parents, listening and education. Listen to your student, but educate yourself at the same time. I think that's going to be very helpful and make that student successful in this academic year. Dr. Heasley, in what way is the student living experience going to be different in the wake of COVID-19? Same question for on-campus housing. How might those be different in this COVID-19 aftermath, if you will?
Well, first we have to acknowledge that universities don't have a best practice playbook to follow. However, many faculty, staff, and students have been working all year in a completely virtual space. So they've learned a few new tricks of the trade that they can have positive outcomes on their student experiences. Here are some of the thoughts that I give for consideration. First is that student connections will continue to take place virtually as well as in person. Students have typically embraced technology and social media, but COVID has really helped harness even more experience in community building in the virtual world. I wouldn't expect this to change going forward. Student clubs and organizations, they're also going to be much more open to hybrid experiences for attending meetings. So this means that students are going to perhaps have more opportunities to take part in different organizations on campus. Ones that traditionally maybe were less inclined if you couldn't attend the meeting face-to-face. Now you're going to see that they might be offering different means of engagement, such as these hybrid or virtual opportunities to attend. And then we have to keep in mind that university administrators and staff will likely feel as though they really have two first-year student cohorts participating at the university at the same time. It's really important that we consider that first-year experiences are now going to also include our rising sophomore group. As for many of them, this is the first time that they're actually living a campus experience. And so I think that most universities and administrators are poised and excited to have two cohorts of students experiencing the campus at the same time. With that means a lot more resources, means a lot more events, and a lot more opportunities to acclimate those students as it's a lot bigger cohort that they're dealing with. And I think the universities invest a lot of financial resources in strengthening and broadening their internet bandwidth. And so I think that this means a lot more uninterrupted FaceTime sessions with you as parents and caregivers and with your students in terms of, for them it might be better gameplay, but nonetheless, I think the campuses are so much more technologically savvy, which is really helpful for connecting and staying engaged.
So now the students have no excuse to FaceTime mom and dad, is what you're saying, right, Dr. Heasley?
That's correct. I mean, they will still find other excuses and reasons to not do it, but yeah. Sure.
Of course. My next question for you, in what ways should parents engage with their student during the post-COVID time?
I want to give a little disclaimer here, and it's what I'm suggesting here is not that it's a one-size-fits-all approach. So before I give some of these opportunities for how parents can engage with their student during post-COVID time, I think it's really important that we keep that in mind. It's always best to check with the student's specific university policies to determine what guidelines may be in place for how parents and guests and caregivers can engage on that campus. That said, here's some things to consider. One, each university will have its own set of different guidelines and expectations for how people can engage on the campus. So it's important to make sure you look those up. Also, be prepared for restrictions that may make physical visitation more complex than just driving onto campus. Based on the aforementioned, virtual contact is most likely to be a universally encouraged way to engage. Remember that there are many ways to engage as well. So aside from the obvious communication options of giving a phone call, texting, email, virtual Zooms, or FaceTime, some other options might also be meaningful. I think about passive programming. One of these might be a passive engagement opportunity through sending a handwritten card or a small gift. Who doesn't like receiving packages in the mail, right? So imagine the intentional message you would send if your student opened up a card and it was $20 and a note that says, hope you can use this to go enjoy late night order of insomnia cookies with friends, or a message that tells them that you're just thinking about them and you want to assist in any kind of community development that you can. Some schools even offer some care packages that can be purchased at fundraisers or charitable cause or through the bookstore. And there are also maybe some local companies, right? Think bakeries, florists, specialty beauty, etc., that also might be able to offer some of these services. And then consider setting up a routine time to connect. I think students are now trying to really learn how to manage their schedule. And so if you can insert that you need to be a part of that and you can be like a class, you have a 15-minute check-in every other day or once a week, twice a week, whatever works for you, but get on a schedule so that it's easy for them to account for that time, and that you can then also make sure that you use that time as wisely as possible to make those connections meaningful.
Dr. Heasley, some of our reoccurring themes is, the way for parents to engage in students during this time. And you did some great examples. I love the care package idea, even something as small as food delivery service credit to one of those major companies like DoorDash or Grubhub. And that can go a really long way. And, what are some considerations to help ease these parents or caregivers as their student embarks on this year of university life?
So this past spring and summer leading into this new academic year, schools went into what I would call this HyperResource Strategy mode, right? So they were able to switch from being reactive to proactive. And I think that that's really important for us to consider. So simply, universities got smart. So I always encourage, let's remind our students that there are two cohorts of students again on campus. And so they need to understand that they're not the only group going through perhaps an opportunity to first time be on campus, or if they're an upper class student who did experience the on-campus life, maybe they need to think about a better opportunity to be a mentor for those who are now coming on campus for the first time, right? And just being open to meeting new people and having it kind of be a fresh start for everyone. Also, I think many universities learned ways of being more nimble and innovative in the face of systematic COVID shutdowns. And so this has allowed schools to really have operational resource strategy. So while An increased number of students will be utilizing campus resources such as counseling, health center, the rec center, and the dining facilities, just to name a few. Rest assured that these campuses have considered and implemented safety protocols to ensure best practices for students who use those services. I think reliance on technology and staff working from home options have also allowed for more intentional thought on extended hours of service for many campus resource offices. And so this is really going to equate to greater accessibility, which is really wonderful for our students, especially those who find themselves on campus maybe in some non-traditional hours, some evening hours or early morning hours. Despite not knowing the impact of even Delta variances and what they may have on our campus, universities have really learned to be agile in the face of ambiguity. Already, schools are entering this academic year with better preparation and protocols for how they're going to handle an outbreak on the campus, with clean space for students who might get ill and might need to be isolated, all the way to meal preparation and delivery to those students, and then how to make sure that faculty are remaining engaged with students who might find themselves in any kind of isolation or quarantine situation. In a nutshell, universities are already connecting with also CDC representatives and healthcare providers to ensure that they're aware of the next steps for continued campus safety. And so I expect that continued testing sites on campus and contact tracing protocols will be in place, but I also expect that campuses are going to be and feel safer than they ever have before.
You make some very interesting points. We've been talking about students adjusting to campus life after these last couple years, but it doesn't just stop there. Parents, they're going to be adjusting too with their student finally leaving, and some might be becoming empty nesters. And also universities, they haven't had students on campus for the last couple years, and they have to kind of readjust and kind of make everything, and like you said, that reactive versus proactive, and a lot of adjustments from all three tiers, what I'm seeing. Thank you very much, Dr. Heasley. Any closing thoughts on student engagement and supporting students while they reside on campus or while they're heading to college for the first time and really just adjusting to university life?
So I want to go back to this. Any engagement is positive engagement as long as it comes with an open heart and it's meaningful and it's kind, and it really comes from this interest in wanting to stay connected. And so I would encourage parents and caregivers to not be hesitant to make that outreach. I think sometimes our students don't know what they need. They're very good at articulating often what they want, but they may not always know what they need. And I feel like there's intuitive sense we have as parents and caregivers where we kind of can sense when perhaps they're going to need a little bit more outreach from us. And so I want to encourage people to do that and follow up. So after that initial outreach, go back and follow up with them and inquire, did they have a success in any kind of plans they implemented, and how did it go, and what might they do differently? And then I always want to say, acknowledge their bravery in that learning space, right? So imagine the impact of the statement, I'm really proud of you and how you handled that situation with great maturity. And next time you'll know how to solve this on your own. Those are the types of words of encouragement that I think will go a long way if students are really going to be wrestling with, being away from home, either for the first time or the first time in a while. And so while there's a lot of excitement, there's also perhaps some trepidation. So how can we help them navigate their way through that smoothly? And lastly, we're all in this together. Be kind, be respectful, be understanding. It's a partnership.
You are right. We are all in this together. Wise words. Dr. Chris Heasley, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. And this has been a very engaging conversation. And hopefully our listeners have some new perspectives and tools regarding community building to help them have a successful start to the school year. And we wish you the very best. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening.